Remember the good old days, when conservatives opposed Russian aggression and tyranny? And remember when progressives cared about the fate of the oppressed people of the world? I'm Warren Kinsella for Sun Media. Thanks for tuning in. Ronald Reagan, who conservatives used to worship, once said that Russia was, quote, the focus of evil in the modern world, end quote. Remember that? And then remember the time that Reagan stood at the Berlin Wall and demanded that Russia's leader tear it down, and how not long afterwards it was actually torn down? Here he is doing just that.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Even progressive champion Pierre Trudeau, who was way too cozy with the former Soviet Union for too much of his life, in 1980 ordered Canada's boycott of the Moscow Olympics to protest precisely the Russian expansionism Reagan had warned about. Anyway, that was then, this is now. Nowadays, Russian warmongering and human rights abuse are met with a shrug by too many on the right and still some on the left. Just this week, video of unelected Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was discovered online, in which Smith falsely claims Ukraine possesses nuclear weapons and that it should be neutral, even after Russia invades it and rapes and murders its citizens. Smith also suggests in a now deleted post that Ukraine and NATO are to blame for the war. Said she, quote, I think the only answer for Ukraine is neutrality, end quote. Watch this video of Smith.
So why would we be surprised if Russia is upset because Ukraine has nuclear weapons and has allied with the United States? So I think the only answer for Ukraine is neutrality.
Smith's words are deeply cowardly and immoral. They were immediately condemned by pretty much everybody, including the Alberta branch of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. The Ukrainian Canadian Congress said Smith's comments were, quote, misinformed. Russia invaded Ukraine not because of NATO and what Ukraine did or didn't do. Russia invaded Ukraine because it seeks the destruction of the Ukrainian state and the annihilation of the Ukrainian people, end quote. But Smith is not alone in her stupidity. Around the same time Smith's video was discovered, the People's Party of Canada put out a fundraising letter and demanded the end to any support for Ukraine. Maxime Bernier, their leader, wrote, quote, we must stop sending money and weapons to Zelensky, end quote. Bernier went on to describe support for Ukraine as, quote, crazy and virtue signaling. When I tweeted that the PPC position was disgraceful, I was bombarded for days by suspiciously similar sounding bot attacks on Twitter, calling Zelensky a Nazi, even though he's Jewish, and calling the war a money laundering front. Tell that to the 15,000 Ukrainians who've been killed, tortured, or wounded by Russia. Anyway, this disgusting indifference to Russian tyranny would never have been tolerated by Ronald Reagan or any US president until 2016. In 2016, Donald Trump came to power, and his victory only came after multiple efforts from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign, the Mueller report found. After that, the talking heads on Fox News and other Republicans took up Trump's pro-Russia refrain. And yes, there are still some on the left who sound like Smith, Bernier, and Trump. The leader of the Quebec Green Party, for example, has called Putin's demands reasonable, and like Bernier, demanded the end to Western support for Ukraine. And yes, some on the left shrug about Putin's campaign of death and destruction. But more and more, it is some Trump-style conservatives who are the ones who are unsympathetic to documented Russian carnage and murder. Folks, sometimes we have to choose sides if we want to remain human. Ukraine is the side of democracy and decency, and those who choose Russia's side risk losing their humanity. If he was still with us, Ronald Reagan would agree. I'm Warren Kinsella for Sun Media. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to follow us on all your favorite platforms.